Thank you very much for joining me here today. To start off, China's population decreased for the second year in a row. The country, known for its former one-child policy, is now facing the opposite problem, with birth rates down and deaths up. The population fell by 2 million people for a second year in a row. China's National Bureau of Statistics reported a record low birth rate for 2023, about 9 million births, and the number has dropped for 7 straight years and has hit the lowest since Communist China was founded more than 7 decades ago. Now, the decline is being blamed in part on fewer people getting married. Young singles are choosing not to get married because of economic uncertainty, unemployment, and high housing prices. At the same time, China is dealing with a rapidly aging population on top of that. Beijing is grappling with funding healthcare and pensions while trying to grow the economy with fewer working-aged people. Another factor in the reduced population is a jump in deaths after COVID-19 restrictions ended. The number of deaths rose by nearly 700,000, which is more than double the previous year's increase. And a viral shoulder bag is at the center of a lawsuit between Japanese-based Uniqlo and Chinese-based Shein. Uniqlo has slapped Shein with a lawsuit accusing it of selling copycats of its popular crescent-shaped bag, which has racked up millions of views on TikTok. And in a statement, Fast Retailing, who owns Uniqlo, said the imitation products that Shein is selling closely resembles Uniqlo's round mini shoulder bag. Uniqlo is demanding Shein immediately stop selling the items and is asking for compensation for damages. And in response, Shein said in a statement to CNN it respects intellectual property rights and takes all infringement claims seriously. And it seems like China has resumed posting youth jobs data after having paused it earlier. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
China published youth employment data Wednesday for the first time since the jobless rate hit a record high in June last year. The new method shows an apparent improvement. China announced a 14.9 jobless rate for ages between 16 and 24 in December, using the new method which excludes students. The China Statistics Bureau said in a statement that students should focus on their studies instead of finding jobs. The Statistics Bureau stopped publishing the politically sensitive figure last year after it reached record highs above 20% in June. It came as the National Bureau of Statistics announced that China's economy hit growth targets in 2023, following the end of the country's years of pandemic isolation. Similar to many countries that have showed signs of bouncing back with growth driven by various factors, such as new business models, digital transformation, and a resurgence in employment opportunities. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
And U.S. stocks finished lower on Wednesday after hot December retail sales data threw cold water on hopes the Federal Reserve will kick off its rate cut campaign as early as March. Here's a quick recap of markets.
Wall Street's main indexes closed lower on Wednesday after robust retail sales data for December further eroded expectations the Federal Reserve will begin cutting rates as soon as March. The Dow dipped 0.25%, while the S&P 500 and Nasdaq each shed more than 0.5%. Retail sales increased more than expected last month, thanks in part to steep discounts, which helped keep the economy on solid ground. That reinforced the view that the Fed may not cut rates as quickly as previously expected and sent the 10-year Treasury yield to over 4.1%, its highest level this year. Shares of rate-sensitive megacaps Alphabet, Amazon, and Nvidia all dipped between 0.5% and 1%. Shares of Tesla dropped 2% after the electric vehicle maker slashed prices of its Model Y cars in Germany a week after reducing prices for some models in China. U.S. stocks in recent weeks have relinquished some gains from a strong end to 2023, but should rebound in the second half of 2024, says Rob Sloimer, technical strategist at RBC Wealth Management.
When you look at the fourth year of the election cycle, which is the year that we're in, the first half of the year tends to be pretty choppy, really a broad trading range, but it tends to resolve to the upside as that uncertainty starts to resolve itself. Maybe a little bit different this year, but in general, what you see is equity markets are up on average 7% in the election year, with the medium up about 10%. And that's very much in line with some of our cycle work that we're looking at.
In other company news, Spirit Airlines tumbled 22%, down sharply for a second day after a U.S. judge on Tuesday blocked JetBlue from acquiring the carrier. Shares of Ford lost more than 1.5% after UBS downgraded the stock to neutral from buy. And Boeing gained more than 1% after the Federal Aviation Administration said inspections of an initial group of 737 MAX 9 airplanes had been completed.
President Biden met with congressional leaders at the White House Wednesday to discuss a supplemental spending bill. The proposed legislation aims to send aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. This sit-down comes one day after the Senate voted in favor of advancing a short-term funding extension. However, challenges remain and the clock is still ticking. Here's more.
Just over 2 weeks into the new year, and U.S. lawmakers are racing around trying to keep the government up and running.
House and Senate negotiators work hard to reach an agreement on top-line government funding levels for the current fiscal year.
If they can't come to terms, funds for key government agencies, including military construction, Veterans Affairs, transportation, the Energy Department, and housing, will dry up.
Work continues to deliver full-year appropriations through regular order. Shutting down the government, even part of it, would interrupt this important progress.
In order to prevent a partial shutdown, the House and Senate have to pass a short-term funding extension and get it to the president's desk. The deadline, 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Friday.
Now, while most Democrats and Republicans want to avoid a shutdown, a small group of hard-right extremists seem dead set on making a shutdown a reality.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says a bipartisan effort is needed for the continuing resolution, but House Speaker Mike Johnson is getting grief from some in the GOP, including the House Freedom Caucus, who posted, quote, "This is what surrender looks like."
The only tactic the hard right has in its playbook is to bully everyone else into submission, just like Donald Trump does.
Americans have scaled back on spending and are expected to pull back a little more as debt remains top of mind. The latest consumer spending survey found households expect to spend less this year. And expected spending growth has also dropped. This comes as the median increase in monthly household spending slowed to just over 5%. And this is the lowest reading since April 2021. Many Americans have relied on debt heavily to make purchases. Now, a growing number of respondents said if they had extra money, they would actually pay down their debt. Tesla CEO Elon Musk said he would be uncomfortable growing the automaker to be a leader in artificial intelligence and robotics without having at least 25% voting control of the company, nearly double his current stake. Here's the report.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk says he wants about 25% voting control of the company. Otherwise, he would be uncomfortable growing the automaker into a leader in artificial intelligence and robotics. The figure is nearly double his current stake of 13%. In a post on social media, Musk said on Monday he wanted enough Tesla stock, quote, to be influential, but not so much that I can't be overturned. He added that, at 15% or lower, the 4-against ratio to override me makes a takeover by dubious interests too easy. Without that voting influence, he said, he would prefer to build AI and robotics products outside of the world's most valuable automaker. The comments marked an abrupt turn for Musk. He has long touted Tesla as an AI robotics company with its partially automated self-driving software and prototype humanoid robots. Morgan Stanley said last year Tesla's Dojo supercomputer that was being built to train AI models could power a near $600 billion surge in the company's market value. However, so far, the company makes most of its money from its electric vehicles. Governance experts and analysts said the billionaire's remarks could infringe on his duties as CEO. Tulane Law School professor Ann Lipton said it suggests he's not only turning down profitable opportunities for Tesla, but also redirecting them to his private companies. Tesla did not respond to a request for comment.
U.S. retail sales increased more than expected in December, boosted by motor vehicle and online purchases, keeping the economy on solid ground heading into the new year. Here's a closer look.
U.S. retail sales increased more than expected in December, another sign that the economy remains strong. The upbeat report from the Commerce Department on Wednesday showed sales rose 0.6% last month. Economists polled by Reuters had forecast 0.4%. The rise in sales was led by online retailers and clothing stores. Receipts at motor vehicles and parts dealers also accelerated. Restaurants and bars, the only services component in the report, were unchanged. Economists view dining out as a key indicator of household finances. Americans have maintained a healthy pace of spending thanks to a relatively strong labor market. Data this month showed strong employment and wage gains in December, as well as a pickup in consumer prices. Wednesday's sales numbers prompted economists to upgrade their economic growth prospects for the fourth quarter, ahead of the government's first GDP estimate for the period, which is due out next week. The report also cast further doubt that the Federal Reserve would start cutting interest rates as soon as March. Still, investors expect the central bank to cut rates at some point this year, and most economists have grown more confident that the economy will avoid a recession.
More people under 50 are getting cancer, it seems like. This is according to a report released Wednesday by the American Cancer Society. The under 50 age group was the only adult demographic group that saw an overall increase in cancer cases between 1995 and 2020. According to the American Cancer Society report, colorectal cancer has become the leading cause of cancer death in men under 50 and the second leading cause in women under 50. In the late 1990s, colorectal cancer ranked fourth for both men and women younger than 50, and the report projects there will be about 2 million new cancer cases in the U.S. this year, and about 600,000 cancer deaths. And Boeing on Tuesday named a retired U.S. Navy admiral to advise the plane maker's CEO on improving quality control after 737 MAX 9 planes were grounded following the in-flight cabin panel blowout on an Alaska Airlines jet. But the news did nothing to stop its shares tumbling again. Here's the report.
Boeing is taking more action to reassure airlines and travellers over the safety of its aircraft. That's after a panel tore off a 737 MAX 9 in mid-air. The Alaska Airlines flight landed without major injuries, but the drama has revived concern over Boeing's top-selling plane. On Tuesday, the firm named retired Admiral Kirkland Donald as its new quality advisor. He will lead a team of outside experts in evaluating quality controls at the firm. Some analysts welcomed the news. But aviation consultant Richard Abulafia told Reuters it was odd to choose an advisor with no background in the industry. The news certainly wasn't enough to save Boeing shares, which sank another 8% or so on Tuesday. They are now down more than a fifth since the start of the year. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has grounded 171 MAX jets until further notice. Besides Alaskan, the affected variant is also operated by United Airlines. Boeing has already set out other steps, including allowing airlines to conduct their own checks on the production process. But the incident has ramped up calls for management changes. Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary, one of Boeing's biggest customers, said the firm needed someone cracking heads ensuring quality.
And a federal judge on Tuesday blocked JetBlue Airways' planned $3.8 billion acquisition of ultra-low-cost carrier Spirit Airlines after agreeing with the U.S. Department of Justice that the combination would be anti-competitive. Here's a look.
A federal judge on Tuesday blocked JetBlue's planned $3.8 billion takeover of Spirit Airlines, agreeing with the U.S. Department of Justice that the combination would hurt consumers. The ruling marked a victory for the Biden administration in its efforts to preserve competition among the lowest-cost airlines to ensure that air travel remains affordable. The judge wrote that the proposed merger, quote, does violence to the core principles of antitrust law to protect the United States' markets and its market participants from anti-competitive harm. Spirit shares tumbled 60%, while JetBlue shares fell 5% after the judge's decision. The companies could still appeal the ruling. JetBlue said it disagreed with the judge's ruling and is considering next steps. The Justice Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
In short, if not blocked, the merger of JetBlue and Spirit would result in higher fares and fewer choices for tens of millions of travelers across the country.
U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, along with 6 Democratic state attorneys general and the District of Columbia, had argued the deal would lead to fewer flights and higher prices for millions of Americans. JetBlue's lawyers argued that the case was a, quote, misguided challenge to a merger between the nation's 6th and 7th largest airlines, which combined control less than 8% of a domestic market dominated by 4 larger carriers. United, American, Delta, and Southwest Airlines control 80% of the market, following a series of previous mergers that the federal government approved.
Weather-related disruption at ports in northern Europe and the diversion of vessels away from the Red Sea are causing congestion at container terminals. AP Moller-Maersk said in an update to customers on Thursday. Here's more.
Shipping giant Maersk blamed attacks in the Red Sea for congestion at container terminals. Maersk and other shipping groups have recently diverted vessels away from the area and the Gulf of Aden, which is one of the world's busiest routes. It follows attacks by Yemen's Houthis. The Danish firm has been forced to send containers on a long journey around Africa rather than through the Suez Canal shortcut. Maersk CEO Vincent Clerc said this week the disruption to global shipping caused by the attacks will probably last at least a few months. That isn't the only problem facing the firm. Maersk added that winter storms and the effects of the holiday season have led to terminal closures and navigation stoppages in northern Europe. Container shipping rates for key global trade routes have soared. US and UK airstrikes on Yemen in response to the Houthi attacks have also raised fears of prolonged disruption to global trade traffic in the Red Sea.
And now an update on global inflation. Britain's annual rate of consumer price inflation sped up for the first time in 10 months in December, following an increase in tobacco duty, increasing to 4.0% from more than 2-year low of 3.9% recorded in November. Here are the details.
Britain's annual rate of consumer price inflation surprisingly sped up in December. The CPI rose slightly to 4% last month, above analyst forecasts and ahead of November's 3.9%. It was also the first rise in 10 months. British officials said the uptick was due to an increase in tobacco duty, which took effect in November. But there were also wider upward pressures from clothing, airfares and entertainment prices. Core inflation, which removes volatile prices, failed to go down for the first time since July. It was unchanged at 5.1% last month, above analyst projections. Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt said after the data was released that inflation didn't fall in a straight line. While the opposition Labour Party argued many families had become financially worse off during the past 14 years of Conservative-led government. Economists had expected a slight fall in inflation. The data led to a jump in sterling as investors pulled back on expectations for an interest rate cut by the Bank of England in May.
And thank you very much for watching NTD Business. I'm Don Ma. We'll see you next week.